This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources families and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This show is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Here's your host, Trever Shirin.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. I am Trever Shirin, and as always, I am joined by Dr. Mayfield.
How's it going?
We're excited to come to you again and realizing that maybe we should stop recording at such early hours of the day.
I know. I don't look this tired all the time, I promise.
Oh, man. But
maybe I do. I don't know. I don't know.
Whenever it's this early, I'm not paying enough attention to you to say if that's true or not. Today we're talking about the importance of fellowship. And this may tie into a lot of conversations we've had in the past about relationships, but I think that there may be some subtle differences between relationship and fellowship.
So you mean I can't be an introvert and stay in my house all the time, reading my books and playing whatever?
I think if that is true of you, I don't think that that's not true. I think that there are a few people in the world who are able to do that. I just don't think that any of them would listen to this podcast.
No, sure, right. Touche.
Because there are people who will go out and they will live in Alaska.
Oh, have you seen that show on TV? Totally off subject.
I've heard about it.
It's called Life Below Zero, and it follows like 6 families that live right around the Arctic Circle.
Oh, no. I've heard about the one where the guy goes and buys a cabin in Alaska, but not that
No,
one.
this one's fun. It's actually, there's a family, and then there's like 2 or 3 families and other individuals, and they live in the remotest parts of Alaska. It's pretty fascinating, they wouldn't be listening to this podcast.
No. And even then, they've got relationship and fellowship with the people that they're around that,
unless they're by themselves,
have this kind of crazy idea that they should go live in the Arctic.
There's this one guy on the show that I'm like, yeah, dude, I think you're probably good out there because you're just a little bit nuts.
Yeah. Well, I think it probably takes a little bit of something to get to that point. So apart from the 1% of humanity
and the rabbit trail we just went on.
Yeah. What kind of, because we've talked about this from the perspective of mind science.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important that people are in a relationship with other people?
That's how we were created. I mean, plain and simple. We were designed to be in relationship with other people, and we function at our best in a safe, trusting relationship. Now, I put safe and trusting there because we can say we have fellowship, but we're yelling at each other and then we're, engaging in putting each other down, whatever. I mean, know those relationships where you're like, I don't know if you guys should be like in fellowship with each other because you make each other horrible. But it's more so the engaging piece of how we're designed physiologically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually, if we're going to go that way too, that we can't function to our fullest extent outside of fellowship.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm realizing as you're talking about it that for me, when I think of the word fellowship, it immediately goes to Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
Like
Fellowship of the Rings, Lord of the
automatic
Rings.
connection.
Well, but think about the framework of that movie. It's about a mixed match of ragtag individuals out there to get the ring to the right place and save the world, right?
Yep. You've got this group of individuals with one quest in mind, with a purpose in mind, looking out for the best interests of the others. Because we're going to get slightly nerdy here. If you want to hear more about the fellowship and this conversation, go to Praying for Superpowers. Right. But they split up into 3 different groups. And each of those groups is looking out for the best interests of the other groups.
Right.
And the other individuals in their group. And I think that speaks volumes about what a fellowship or what camaraderie or what a group or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. I think there's a lot to be found in the Lord of the Rings series about what that should look like, and that it's something that our lives benefit from having.
And Americans suck at.
Yeah, we're not great at it. We're a pretty individualistic culture.
Well, so let's talk about then what are components of fellowship. I mean, if you want to use it, and we can get really nerdy and base it off of the Lord of the Rings stuff. But I think Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and all those that were part of the Inklings group, by the way, if you've never been to the Eagle and the Child in England, best pub ever that's where they met weekly to go over their writings and stuff. But I think fellowship basing off of that takes consistency.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have to be every week, but it has to be somewhat patterned, somewhat expected. There has to be mutuality.
Yeah.
Right. It can't be, I'm going to go and fellowship with Trevor, but Trevor, please, fill me up and encourage me the whole time and tell me how great I am and all that kind of stuff. No, like there's got to be mutuality. It's not going to be, it can't be one-sided.
Yeah.
But there has to be kind of a glue, right? I mean, I'm not going to just go fellowship with somebody off the street that I don't know.
Yeah.
You have to have history. You have to have somewhat of a relationship with, but you have to have commonality, right? I wouldn't find you at a car show,
right,
fellowshipping with guys that like cars, because that's not your thing, right? No. And I was really proud of you for telling me the kind of car and all that kind of stuff you just bought. But that was
because somebody wrote it.
Because somebody wrote it down for you. But to be honest, as much as I appreciate you and your friendship, I probably wouldn't go to a Comic-Con.
No,
because it's just not my thing. I would do it because it's important to you, and if we were fellowshipping, I would go do that. Right, that's the mutuality.
If I asked you, Mark, will you please go to this?
Yeah, I would say yes because we're friends. I don't know if I would go fellowship with people there on my own.
Sure.
Right, and so I think it's that commonality as well.
Well, and if you look at the Inklings, we explored this a little bit on Praying for Superpowers this week, and.
Double dipping.
Yeah, double dipping. I think it's such a good conversation.
It is a good conversation. Yeah.
And there were aspects that I think are really important for this show because they were all Oxford professors. And I mentioned that they were a diverse group, and then Peter reflected to me that they were all white males. But I meant diversity from the way of their fields of practice. There was a doctor, there was an author, a theologian, a philosopher, a poet.
And the funny thing is you only hear about Tolkien and Lewis, but there were like 4 to 6 guys.
Yeah, and I think they started it up again. Like, there's a new club called the Inklings that meets at the Eagle and Child. But yeah, we only hear about the 2, but there was like the family doctor was involved, and they called him the old quack. And I think that we find a glue, and it's not as obvious as our interests a lot of the times. It may have to do with our values or the things we're passionate in life, and that can add so much value to the group. Sure,
and they were unashamed and unabashed to say that they not always agreed with each other, and there are times that they had arguments, and there was, a couple of times I was reading, was it from Tolkien or from C.S. Lewis, that they called each other's work crap.
Yeah,
I mean, like they brought what they were writing and working on, and they're like, nope, this sucks.
Yeah, Well, and J.R. Tolkien had this concept about dwarves and how they would originate, and C.S. Lewis disagreed.
Because he had his own.
And so I think what happened was C.S. Lewis said that dwarves just popped out of rocks in Narnia because of how silly he thought it was in J.R. Tolkien's. Right. They didn't always get along.
But I think that's something that's key, because I think a lot of our listeners are going to say, well, if I'm in a fellowship with somebody, I always have to walk away feeling good. Or
why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's a selfish understanding of what relationship is. If I'm really blunt, I think it's that we don't like to be challenged, that our initial knee-jerk reaction is that we get defensive. We make assumptions or whatever. And it's sad, because the desire I have in my life is that I have a group of people in my life that are going to be lifelong friends, right? Maybe we're not going to live in the same area all the time.
Sure.
But, that we can pick up where we left off when we get together. So I think that's a mixture of deep relationship and fellowship. But I think figuring out where you're at in your spheres and in your world, how do you create opportunities for fellowship?
It's a good question.
Because most of us, how many times do you go home, open the garage door, pull your car in, and close the garage door?
Oh, well, every time.
Yeah. and not just get out of the car and walk out to your mailbox or check your yard and go, oh, hey neighbor, and
I have one neighbor that I know, his name's Billy, and that's it.
Yep. And you've been there for
I've been there for 3 years.
You've had some turnaround though.
It's a neighborhood with a lot of renters, but my wife and I have talked about that of like we remember our parents would have the phone numbers of all their neighbors.
Yep.
And they at least knew their names. The only one that I really know the name of is Billy.
We in our new neighborhood, we just moved into a new neighborhood about 8 months ago, and we have the numbers of our neighbors and we know them. And but how do we hold that balance of I don't want you in my house all the time, but I do want to create some opportunities for fellowship.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question: do you think fellowship and relationship are synonymous?
I think that it's sort of like all ravens are crows, but not all crows are ravens. No, opposite. All ravens are crows, but not all crows are ravens.
Okay, you lost me there.
All squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. So I think that all fellowship is relation. No, all relationship is fellowship.
Okay,
but not all
fellowship.
Relationship.
All relationship is fellowship.
Yep.
Not all fellowship is relationship.
Correct.
Okay.
The opposite.
Say that again, because I think our listeners are.
I think I have it. Sorry for confusing everyone.
Everybody's like, huh?
I think that all fellowship is relationship, but not all relationship is fellowship.
That makes sense. So if I'm in a family or have a friend that I'm like, or a person that I'm in my life that I'm like, okay, I have to be in relationship with you because of work or proximity, but I really don't want a fellowship.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or friends that you sit next to and just scroll Facebook with. Like, I wouldn't count that as fellowship.
I don't think that's friends either.
Because I think especially if we're pulling from the Fellowship of the Ring, that there was a lot of intent in that. With the Inklings, there was a lot of intent in why they were meeting.
Well, and I think, and I think that's the big thing is intent. And I think we don't, as a society nowadays, and this is a broad sweeping expose, but we're not intentional anymore. I think in a lot of different ways, right?
Which ties into your theory about complacency.
It does, and if we're complacent, then we're not engaged, and if we're not engaged, then we have the right in our minds to be on the extremes. Or if I'm being challenged, I'm going to disengage because I just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to lash out at you and those kind of things. And that I think is the absence of fellowship. Because if I'm in fellowship with you, and we have been over the last. We were talking about this a couple months ago, about 3.5 years now.
Yeah, something like
that, and I lose track of time. Yeah. But I am going to assume the best of you 99.9% of the time, because of that. Right. But if I don't have that fellowship piece, or we have that disconnection, or I'm complacent in our fellowship, then that changes.
Yeah, and I think what I hear in that is, if we're not intentional about our relationships and our fellowship or groups that we're a part of, it's easy to allow bitterness to come about, to find place in our perspective of those people.
Well, let me ask you this, as we're talking about this, do you think that there is I'm just thinking, I'm doing a lot of work right now with the intersection of intellect, mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health, and that kind of stuff. Do you think that there has to be a healthy balance of those four to do fellowship well? Because you've met those people that are really intellectual, and you're like, yeah, I wish you would connect a little bit more to your emotions or whatever.
Yeah.
But the person that's too emotional, I don't know. It's just a thought I was.
What counseling theory is it with the wheel, where you have the 7 different things that you need in life, and they're like safety and fun?
That's reality therapy.
Yeah, so I think I'm starting to see the world that way.
It's part of my framework for working with clients too.
Yeah, that there are primary things that we need in our life, and if one of those things is running on empty, the entire wheel is off.
Right.
And so if you look at the wheel like a pie, and each slice is something different, so family or alone time, or I don't remember all of them, but I do know that fun is one of them.
Right.
And that's been really encouraging, because that means I should be having fun. It's not just I can.
Right.
It's this is important now.
Yeah.
And as I've started to see the world that way, I've started to interact with my friends that way. And so if we're we have a couples group that my wife and I lead, and we know that it's really important for us to be intentional in investing into each other and encouraging each other and getting into some of the heavier things that we don't talk about outside of that. But it's also really important that every once in a while we just go to a park and we play games and there's no real conversation about heavy stuff. It's just fun.
Yeah, goofing and yeah, absolutely.
So I'd say definitely, I think it needs to be rounded. I think there's a time and a place to have people that fit a certain aspect. So like, I'm not going to go to my professor and look for emotional support or for them to tell me how to like do my taxes or something. Like I'm looking for them for the information that I need to get through my education. And so in that way, and that I think that goes to all relationship or all, whatever I said earlier. That was
I think you said that all relationship is not necessarily fellowship.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wonder too, for our listeners, how do we? This is something I've been wrestling with too, because I've been really trying hard over the last 6 months to be intentional about my schedule, not allow busyness to take over. But you look at our American culture, you turn on the news, we were talking about this today. Oh, no, I wasn't talking about you. I was talking to Adam, our inquiry coordinator here at Mayfield Counseling Center, and he walked in, you could just tell he was just pissed. And I said, what's going on? He goes, I just mad at everybody today. People are driving too crazy and they're always, and I'm like, but that's
an old man.
I know. Well, he's just turned 30. But I think in some ways it's true that everybody is in such a hurry.
Yeah.
We're so busy that, and happens at our churches, this happens in our schools, this happens in, our neighborhoods. I mean, everything that we've just talked about, that we don't slow down to take stock of life. And that's part of why I'm not saying that there's a culture or a country that has it all together, so don't hear me say that. But when I was in the UK, there, parts of the UK, London is very much just like the United States in the sense of its busyness. But you go out into the country, you go to Wales, you go to Scotland, and the pace of life slows down a little bit. And, we were in Wales, and I remember Wales is kind of divided by different valleys, and there's different villages in the valleys based on coal mining and that kind of stuff. We were supporting an organization in one of the valleys, and sitting with this old lady, and she goes, heard y'all were coming, and I'm really excited. She didn't say y'all, but we're coming and excited to come and see you. And she goes, I made the trek. And I said, oh, how long did you come? She goes, I came from the next valley over. And I said, how long is that? She goes, oh, about 3 miles. I'm like, that was the trek. But their communities are they slow down, and they're engaged, and there's fellowship and the intentionality, whether it be in the markets or the churches or whatever. But then you also look at how the family systems are developed. Yeah. Right. And it's changing slightly, but you could have 2 or 3 generations living under one roof. Yeah. And that is more intentional than it is what we do here.
Yeah.
That's just a thought.
Well, I think, we've talked about this before, especially with our conversation with Christy Tamelo last season about, please excuse the sirens.
Excuse the sirens. We'll just let that go by for a sec. Thank you. Okay.
With our conversation with Christy Tamelo, that we've put so much pressure on being successful. And it's a very narrow definition of what success is. And I think a side effect of that is that it's always go to the next step. There's not room for the transitional period.
Sure.
It's
or enjoying the transition period.
Yeah, or enjoying being present in that moment that you're in, like we talked about last week, I think. And so like we get out of the car, close the garage, walk into the house because I have to make dinner, I have to do the dishes, I have to do this X, Y, and Z, rather than, oh, isn't it a nice day outside?
Well, like today, it's early here in Colorado Springs. Well, not super early.
It's not super early, but we've been up since super early.
But it's springtime.
Yep.
I love springtime.
Yep.
And I was getting out of my car, and I was walking into the office, and I took a deep breath, and I smelled rain. And I just that's my favorite smell in the whole world. Yeah. So I just stopped and just took it in instead of pushed past it going, okay, if it's going to rain today, I'm going outside and just kind of absorbing it. Sometimes that allows me to slow down a little bit.
And I don't think we do that with relationships very often.
Well, no, because I think we feel like we have to accomplish something, right? I think the true indicator for a relationship is how do we do in silence, right? I mean, I know when we first started getting to know each other, we were always talking and we were asking questions and stuff, but we've made a couple of road trips together for speaking engagements. And there was no need or no pressure to have to have a conversation because we were comfortable in that space. And I think that's a key indicator for a fellowship, is that we don't have to perform. We don't have to be on. We can just be good, bad, ugly. There's been times where I've been in relationship with or fellowship with others and it's like, how you doing? Not so good. Life sucks right now. And oh, okay. Like, I'm not going to run away from that. Tell me more about it. What's going on? So I think it's, if that made any sense whatsoever, it did in my mind. But I think
it made sense. Okay. I'll check when I'm editing.
But it's just the idea that we have to have certain things in place.
Yeah. It's interesting just to look at how the pressure to succeed in things transcends into, or not transcends, but bleeds over into our relationships with people.
Oh yeah.
I don't think that I'd thought about it that way before.
No, but how often are you in a relationship where you feel like you have to perform, have to be a certain way?
I think pretty often.
Right. Yeah.
Even if it's not as obvious as others, I think that it's probably more often than I think.
Right. Yeah. So I think for our listeners, like, what practicality wise, because I think they're going to start going, okay, how do I develop fellowship? Well, I think you don't think about it too hard. What things are in front of you that you can create? Maybe it's with your family.
Yeah.
I talk about this with my talks of how often do we create intentional time with our kids and our spouse, sitting around the table. It was my wife's birthday this weekend, and she loves Legos, so we stopped at the Lego store, and the kitchen table has been just one mess of building. Nice. And we sit around the table and just talk and hang out. But that's intentional, right?
Yeah.
Dinner time around the table is intentional. So start with what's in front of you. Maybe it is your family. Yeah. Then maybe is it a church group, or is it a coworker, or is it a neighbor, or is it
maybe you go to a coffee shop often and you see some people that are there regularly.
Right. Introduce yourself. I don't think we need to overthink this too much.
Yeah.
But I think we feel, and I can speak for myself, I know I feel when I'm out of sync in fellowship with others because something's missing.
Yeah.
You feel it. Or, have a little bit of whiskey and watch a TV show or something like that. But that all the time, you begin to feel the void of relationship and fellowship.
Then you're that person in Alaska.
Right, exactly. Which some days doesn't sound so bad.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But what else do you, advice-wise, I think that's the biggest one, is don't overthink it. I mean, look around you and see what's there.
Yeah. And I think you'll be surprised what you see as well. What I found, too, is I have interests in playing games, board games, Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. And what I've done is I've built this group of individuals who I will send out an invite to 20 people. And there's usually 2 to 4 people that will show up.
Yeah.
And there's some rotation that happens in that. But I've formed a group of these 20 people who inconsistently come to these things that I do. And what's been wonderful is to see relationships build not only between me and the people that show up, but between everybody who shows up intermittently too.
Sure.
And in that way, you can kind of be a catalyst for fellowship. And I mean, it's as simple as, hey, I really want to play this board game on Thursday. Is anyone available or want to?
And if people show up, great. And if they don't, it's not like you're taking it personally. It's just you're putting it out there.
Right. So definitely. Yeah. And I think there has to be that expectation too, because I could only imagine, like, I've been in situations where I'm really excited for something and I invite a bunch of people and no one shows up. Right. And then it's hard to not feel like that reflects on who you are. But if you just put it out as like, hey, I'm interested in doing this. Does anyone want to join me?
Right.
It's low risk.
Well, as we close, that's the biggest thing that I've done with my kids, is the biggest fellowship time I've had with them is, hey, I'm going to the store. You want to come? in the conversations we have in the car, the fun we have walking down the aisle. So it's inviting people to join in with stuff that's already going on instead of creating this extraordinary event.
Totally.
That we get disappointed with.
Yeah.
So give it a shot.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us at Candid at mayfieldcounseling.com. And if you are looking for any help or support in whatever's going on in your life, feel free to contact Mayfield Counseling Center's 719-452-4803. Adam Smith, the guy who likes to complain about how fast people are moving, will answer your call.
Nice.
We'll catch you next week.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, you can email candid@mayfieldcounseling.com or call 719-452-4803.